Hi, my name's Emmeline, and at my own mother's birthday, they told me there was no seat left, then pointed me toward the grass, beside the trash bins. Not as a joke, not with a smirk, just like it made perfect sense. They said, family first, but I wasn't even on the guest list. I watched them toast each other with champagne I paid for, pose in front of banners I designed, stand on land I owned. And when the helicopter arrived for me, that wasn't my entrance, it was their reckoning. But what really broke me wasn't being forgotten. It was realizing they never planned to remember me at all. So now I ask you, what would you do if your own family made sure you were always the one standing just outside the frame? The air was heavy with Florida humidity, but it wasn't the kind of heat that made you sweat. It was the kind that made you feel small, like even the weather knew who belonged and who didn't. The Langley estate looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. White hydrangeas exploding from every urn, soft classical music floating through hidden speakers, and gold-trimmed banners fluttering from custom tent poles. The banner above the entrance read, Vera Langley, the matriarch of Palm Beach. I stepped out of the black town car in my charcoal suit. Not a wrinkle on it. My heels clicked softly on the cobblestone path, my sunglasses hiding everything I didn't want them to see. No one noticed my arrival. Or maybe they did, and chose not to. At the check-in table, a young woman, probably 20, held a clipboard like it was a weapon. She glanced up and hesitated. Hi there, this section is for guests. Vendors should head around to the service path by the catering trucks. Vendors. I didn't say anything right away. Just looked at her clipboard. Do you mind checking for the name Emmeline Fairfax? She flipped through pages. Melissa, Camille, Byron, Callista, of course. But not me. I'm sorry, she said, her voice syrupy and firm. You're not listed. I didn't argue. I pulled out my phone and opened the only thing resembling an invitation I had received. A forwarded email chain with a subject line that read, Vera's birthday, FYI only. My name was in the CC line, not the TU. No RSVP, no instructions. Just a low-res PDF flyer that said, family-only celebration. That's what I was. Family, in theory. I handed her the phone. She looked, then gave me a nervous smile and said, Well, I guess you're good to go in then. Just head that way, please. As I passed her, I didn't thank her. She hadn't done anything to deserve it. The estate shimmered with false warmth. Gold chairs lined the lawn under sheer white tents. Waitstaff wore all black uniforms, moving like whispers. A photographer was already snapping shots of Vera with her other children. They wore summer pastels and matching grins. I watched them from behind a velvet rope that no one had bothered to unhook for me. Emmeline? A voice called. I turned. A cousin I hadn't seen in years tilted her head and squinted. Wow, I almost didn't recognize you. You've matured. I smiled. Not the warm kind. The kind you give when someone's words taste sour before they leave their mouth. Vera approached next, all grace and pearls. She stopped a few feet away, eyes scanning me like I was a surprise test result. You made it, she said slowly, as if she wasn't entirely sure how. How thoughtful. That was all. No embrace, no happy to see you. Just a nod and a judgment dressed as civility. I gave her a practiced smile, polished, polite, distant. I wouldn't miss it. The last time I felt this unseen was years ago, at another birthday, mine. Back then, I'd been asked to set the table while everyone else took their seats. There had been toasts, laughter, but not once did they say my name. I was the helper, the quiet one, the reliable fallback no one invited, but everyone expected to be there anyway. Standing now near the catering path, I caught my reflection in a stainless steel tray resting on the buffet line. My hair was pinned tight. Makeup understated. Expensive, but never flashy. Just like they liked it when they tolerated me. Maybe I should have stayed away. I pulled my clutch closer and shifted my weight, considering my exit. There was a car nearby. My assistant would have me wheels up to New York in under an hour if I texted abort. No one here would miss me. Not really. Then my phone buzzed. A message from James, my executive assistant. Private jet is refueled. Asia board expects your signature within 48 hours. Another ping followed right after. Shell Corp transfer cleared. Estate ownership updated. You now own 100% of the Langley property. I stared at that text, then looked around. There they were. Callista toasting with guests near the media wall. Byron bragging about a fake investment win. Vera on her third air kiss of the afternoon. None of them knew, not yet. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, smoothed the front of my suit, and adjusted my sunglasses. Let them keep their speeches. Let them forget to say my name. I wasn't here to be remembered. I was here to be undeniable. I'd barely made it 10 steps onto the lawn when I saw her, Callista. Standing near the drink station like she owned the oxygen, she wore that butter-colored silk dress that caught the sun just right, her smile frozen into place like porcelain. She spotted me before I could pretend not to see her. "Oh, you made it," she said, her tone bright, but her eyes, well, her eyes didn't smile. I nodded. "I did." She leaned in slightly, glancing behind me. "We had a little mix-up with seating. You know how these things go? All the family tables filled up fast. But there's a great little spot over by the hydrangeas. Super private, nice breeze." She gestured casually to the far end of the lawn. I followed the line of her manicured finger and saw it. A single white folding chair placed awkwardly behind a catering tent, next to a row of trash bins. There wasn't a table, not even a shade umbrella. Just a chair, and a patch of dead grass. My eyes flicked back to hers. She didn't flinch. "Sounds ideal," I said. I didn't argue. That would have given her too much. The walk to that seat felt longer than it was. I passed table after table of laughing guests, clinking glasses, leaning in to snap photos under soft golden lighting. At my destination, a catering staff member was taking a smoke break 2 steps away from the chair. He moved slightly when I arrived, but didn't speak. I sat down on the metal folding chair, wobbly, cooler than I expected. No place card, no napkin, no drink. A few moments passed before a man walked by with a flute of champagne. He paused, squinting at me. "Oh, I assumed you were crew," he said with a chuckle, then kept walking before I could correct him. I didn't correct him. From where I sat, I could see the main table in full. Callista was in the center, flanked by Vera and Byron. Laughter spilled from that direction like perfume. Light, artificial, and just a touch too much. I adjusted the strap of my purse, letting my fingers slide across the leather as I studied the scene. The placement wasn't accidental. No one forgets to seat the woman who funded half the evening. A moment later, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am?" An older gentleman stood nearby, slightly out of breath. "Do you know where the valet booth is?" I blinked. "Not today," I replied, offering a tight smile. He looked puzzled, then realized. "Oh, you're not part of the staff. My apologies." I nodded once. "Happens more often than you think." He wandered off, and I leaned back slightly, catching the sun through the tent's flapping corner. From this angle, I could see Callista laughing again, throwing her head back in that way she practiced since college, like she was always in a commercial for something expensive and shallow. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood to be reminded of the world that actually valued me. Not long after, a girl no older than 19 jogged over with a chilled water bottle. She had a lanyard with event intern dangling from her neck. "Hi, someone said you might need hydration?" She smiled as she held it out. I took it, twisting off the cap slowly. "Only the best treatment for the help, huh?" She froze. "Oh no, I didn't mean—" I waved her off. "Relax, you're fine, I'm used to it." She left quickly, red-faced. From where I sat, I had a full view of the welcome banner stretched across the courtyard arch. Celebrating Vera Langley, a legacy of grace. Below it, the family's monogram logo in elegant serif type. My type. the custom font I designed 10 years ago for a branding project they never credited me for. It was always like this, my work visible, but my name scrubbed clean. The sky had started shifting by then, softening from Florida glare into that dusty gold hour. I watched guests pose with Vera near the banner, taking selfies with the monogram I birthed. Every inch of the setup bore my fingerprint. The linens, my design, the menu, I approved it. The floral arrangements, chosen from my shortlist, all unacknowledged. I was finishing the last of my water when a firm hand landed gently on my shoulder. "Ma'am?" a deep voice said. I looked up to find a man in a tailored black suit, earpiece tucked beneath one ear. Discreet, but unmistakable. He leaned closer. "We're ready for you. The bird's inbound." I stood, dusted imaginary crumbs from my lap, and looked one last time at the white folding chair beside the trash. Let them keep their chairs. Mine had wings. Callista glided through the central aisle like a bride being escorted by legacy itself. Vera held her arm, not gently, but proudly, as though parading her greatest achievement through a corridor of curated admiration. I stood just behind the last row of chairs, close enough to hear the murmured approval from the guests. "She's everything her mother hoped for," someone whispered, and another nodded like it was gospel truth. I didn't move. I didn't need to. I'd heard versions of that line my whole life, in different rooms, through different mouths. The words always stuck the same way, just deep enough to sting, never loud enough to confront. The reception hall led into a side gallery where Vera had set up a family legacy display. I wandered in while the guests followed Callista for more photos. The display table was covered in velvet, its lighting carefully angled. Old family photos, awards, and heirlooms sat arranged like museum artifacts. One box drew me in instantly, an ornate glass case trimmed with brass. Inside it, the ring. Oval sapphire center, flanked by 2 tiny diamonds, all set in yellow gold. I knew every curve of it, knew the way it caught afternoon light through my childhood bedroom window. I had worn it once when I was 16, after Vera pressed it into my palm on the night of my scholarship award dinner. "When I'm gone," she had said then, "this is yours, for the girl who never asks for anything but gives everything." Back then, I thought that moment meant something. Now, a plaque rested beside the ring, gifted to Callista Boone to honor her mother's legacy. No mention of me, no footnote, just another piece of my past scrubbed clean and reassigned. I stared at the case. People walked around me, taking pictures of the display like it was just another exhibit. But all I could hear was Vera's voice, the promise she made, and the quietness she wore today in its place. Later, back in the garden, Vera took center stage beneath the arbor. The guests returned to their seats, fanning themselves with printed programs. Vera lifted a champagne flute and began her speech. "This day is not just about me. It's about the people who have carried our family name with pride, with grace. Today, I want to honor a woman who has dedicated decades to this legacy." "Callista!" Applause erupted. Flashbulbs fired. And then, in front of everyone, Vera took the heirloom ring and slipped it onto Callista's finger. It was surreal, like watching a dream you once had be given to someone else while you're still awake. Callista's face turned toward the cameras, expression poised, ring hand raised just enough to sparkle. She didn't look at me. Didn't need to. The message was clear. I scanned the crowd for Vera's eyes, and when I found them, she smiled. A soft smile. The kind you give a stranger on an airplane, not warmth, performance. There was no joy in her eyes, just strategy. Don't make a scene. I didn't. I turned away and walked to the far end of the garden. There was a low stone wall near the rose trellis. I stood there, hands resting on the edge, watching everyone from behind the cover of shadows. "You can't steal what I've already let go," I told myself. But I was lying. That ring had been a promise, not just of inheritance, but of place, of presence, of being seen. A voice crackled over the mic again. The MC, chipper and rehearsed. Let's give one more round of applause to the children of Vera Langley, who made this celebration possible. Melissa, Camille, Byron, and of course, Callista. No pause, no hesitation, no Emmeline. Someone nearby let out a quiet gasp, not loud enough to echo, but loud enough to mark the silence that followed. I felt it more than heard it. I didn't flinch, I didn't look around. I just breathed in, long and slow, then exhaled through my nose. I wasn't surprised, but surprise was never the point. It was about certainty. It was about making sure I knew. And I did. The sky had started to dim just enough for the event crew to switch on the soft golden lights strung above the garden. From where I stood behind a column near the side archway, I could see the MC tapping the mic. That kind of nervous little tap people do when they want attention, but aren't sure they've earned it. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced with a wide grin, please raise your glasses as we present a tribute video to Vera's legacy, prepared by her loving children. A hush fell over the crowd. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped mid-air. All eyes turned to the massive screen that descended smoothly from the trellis above the floral arch. The lights dimmed further, leaving just the glow of the screen to wash over the garden. And then, the video began. Images floated in. Black and white photos of Vera as a young woman, twirling in summer dresses, holding Callista as a newborn, standing beside her husband at some long-forgotten gala. There were grand vacations in Italy, candid laughs from birthdays past, but only ever the same faces. My siblings, my mother, never me. At one point, I caught a glimpse of myself, barely a frame, blurry in the background of a group shot from a Thanksgiving 20 years ago. I wasn't named, not even tagged in the subtitles like the others were. Just a face in a crowd, easy to ignore. The music swelled, an instrumental score with soaring strings and sentimental piano, and voiceovers began. Callista first, of course, then Byron, then Camille. Sweet recollections, performative gratitude, and enough platitudes to stock a self-help section. Vera, they said, had sacrificed everything. Vera built this family from dust. Vera never let them go hungry. My voice, absent. The segment I had personally spent hours editing, gone. No mention of my video submission, no trace of the audio clip I'd stitched together of Vera saying, "No one helps me like you do." No glimpse of the slow pan across photos I had scanned, cleaned, restored. Weeks of effort vanished. I leaned toward the nearest event coordinator and whispered, "My segment?" She blinked. "Sorry?" "My video. I submitted one." "Oh, there was file corruption, I think. We were on deadline. It didn't make it into the final cut." No apology, just indifference. Back at the center, Callista had now taken the mic. "Not everyone could be here tonight," she said, letting her voice drop just enough to sound emotional. "But we honor all of Mom's children, especially those who made real sacrifices to uphold her name." I was sitting 20 feet away. No one looked in my direction. A few guests tilted their heads. I caught one woman mouthing something to her husband. "She's here, right?" He shrugged. "That's the tech sister, low profile, always has been." I heard it, every word, and I didn't blink. Instead, I let myself drift back to the hours I'd spent working on that video. Alone in my home office, a second cup of coffee gone cold beside me, headphones in as I adjusted the timing of each transition. I had chosen the piano music myself. I had cleaned every scan. I had wrestled a 30-second voice memo from Vera's voicemail archives just to stitch something real into it. And now I sat, anonymous in my own family's tribute. I lifted my glass of champagne, flat and too warm, and took a slow sip. Didn't move, didn't flinch. Just watched the applause swell for a film that had erased me. As the credits rolled and people began clapping, my phone buzzed against my hip. I pulled it out under the tablecloth and glanced down. Forbes request, confirm title before publishing tomorrow. The quiet billionaire behind Palm Beach's hidden power. I looked back up. Callista had returned to her seat, beaming, her eyes scanning the crowd for validation like she needed it to breathe. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. If they won't give me space at the table, I thought, I'll buy the table next year. After the tribute video, the energy of the afternoon shifted. People seemed lighter, eager to sip more wine, nibble on crab cakes, take photos with Vera near the floral wall. The main lawn had been transformed into a corridor of admiration and subtle judgment. And at the center of it, the gift showcase began. A presentation table had been arranged just off the garden path, swathed in cream-colored silk and lined with an unnecessary number of votive candles. Guests were gathering, murmuring in that performative tone reserved for wealth-fueled sentimentality. Callista was already there, radiant as always, pointing out items as if she'd curated the whole affair herself. Then I saw it. At the far end of the table, under a spotlight angled just so, sat a leather-bound family genealogy album, limited edition, hand-stitched binding, gold foil embossed on Italian calfskin. I had commissioned it 3 months prior from a private artisan in Edinburgh, paid in full, hand-picked the materials, oversaw the design. Vera reached for the attached note and read it aloud. With all our love, from Callista. I didn't flinch, but my smile evaporated. The heat at the back of my neck rose slowly, not from embarrassment. No, it was something else. Precision, calculation. She had taken my gift and grafted her name onto it like a parasite dressing itself as a host. I stepped closer, opened the album carefully. Inside, each page was designed as I'd instructed, one dedicated to each child. Except when I reached mine, the pattern broke. My page was smaller, cropped photos. My graduation photo wasn't there. In its place, a generic quote misattributed to someone else. My name was squeezed into the bottom corner, like a last-minute addition someone regretted having to include. Near the dessert bar, I spotted a family friend, Carolyn, who had helped facilitate the Edinburgh order. I approached casually. "Beautiful book, isn't it?" I said. She nodded. "Stunning. Callista said you two co-sponsored it." "Really?" I tilted my head. "That's odd. My credit card didn't say co-anything." Carolyn blinked. I thought she was quite clear. "It's okay," I cut in gently. "Callista has always been excellent at adjusting facts to fit her brand." Carolyn didn't respond. I moved on, wandering toward the Langley Memories wall near the buffet tables. An entire section had been curated with photos of birthdays, holidays, school recitals. Carefully framed, each memory told a story. I stopped at one labeled Callista's College Send-Off, a photo from a dinner we had years ago, the night before she left for New York. Except, I had been there, and in this version, I wasn't. The space where I once stood beside her in that picture had been replaced with a potted fern. Literally. They had cropped me out and filled the void with a plant. I stood in front of that frame a long while, barely blinking. My fingers wrapped tightly around the stem of my wine glass until I felt the ridges imprint into my skin. Then I breathed out, relaxed my grip, and set the glass down. No smashing, no scene. Let them keep pretending. Eventually, pretense folds under its own weight. Behind me, laughter swelled as Vera took the mic for another brief speech. The room hushed again. She was good at that, commanding stillness without asking. "All my daughters have brought me joy," she said, pausing for effect. "Especially Callista, whose elegance and generosity have truly shaped this evening." Applause broke out. A waiter brushed past me to deliver champagne to someone 3 steps away. No one acknowledged my presence. I glanced back at the table. The flowers? Mine. The menu? Mine. The event design, fonts, logos, all mine. They had even reused the catering team I originally hired for a company gala last spring. But Callista's name was the one being etched into everyone's memory today. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I slid it out with slow fingers. Shell Corp payment processed. Ownership of Langley estate officially transferred. I looked back at the house. The same house where I'd once been grounded for sneaking out to apply for an internship because Langley girls don't chase jobs. The house where Callista's wedding had cost 6 figures, and I wasn't asked to speak. I lifted my half-empty glass toward the family crest engraved on a silver platter nearby. You can steal the spotlight all you want. I already bought the stage. After the last round of applause, I stepped away from the edge of the party, the phone still warm in my hand from the Shell Corp confirmation. The legal title was mine now, but ownership doesn't change blood, and blood had just drawn its lines in ink. I made my way toward the roped-off main dining area, where Vera sat with her polished circle of pride and photo-ready progeny. The velvet rope, thick and symbolic, stood between me and the woman who once rocked me to sleep, humming Patsy Cline. A staff member intercepted me, not rudely, but with that rehearsed tone you learn from managing high-end parties. "Excuse me, ma'am. This section is for immediate family only." I looked past him to Vera. She was laughing at something Callista had said, her pearl earrings catching the light. I gestured slightly. "That's my mother." He hesitated for a beat, then leaned slightly toward a clipboard. "We were given a list this morning. Your name's not on it." I didn't say anything. I just nodded once and stepped back, the same way you'd step off a curb after realizing the bus you thought was yours wasn't stopping. At the welcome table, guests were now flipping through small booklets tucked into the place settings, part program, part printed tribute. I took one and thumbed through. "Thank you to the Langley children," the page read. It listed Melissa, Camille, Byron, and Callista in large serif type. At the bottom, in a smaller font, barely noticeable unless you looked, Evelyn Fairfax. Extended guest, Evelyn. Not even the right name, not even close. The ink had dried. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me with purpose. I found the event coordinator near the catering entrance, clipboard in hand and headset clipped to her collar. I didn't raise my voice. "You listed me as what?" She blinked. "Sorry?" "In the program, you listed me as an extended guest, and you misspelled my name." "Oh, I think we assumed. Since you didn't send a bio or RSVP through the family thread, it was hectic getting everything into layout." I held up my hand, stopping her. "It's fine." It wasn't, but fine is the language of women like me in rooms like this. I slipped away before she could offer a paper-thin apology. By the catering tent, behind a lattice partition, I leaned against a support beam and listened. Through the crisscrossed wood, I could see Vera laughing at something Byron whispered. Someone clinked a fork against a glass. A toast, maybe. I didn't move. A child's voice cut through the hum. "Mom, who's that lady over there?" A pause. "She's not part of this side of the family," the woman replied without hesitation. I didn't see which of them said it. I didn't need to. Something inside me folded shut, quietly, like a velvet curtain at the end of a show no one clapped for. I kept trying to fit into a room that was built to lock me out. That was the problem. I hadn't outgrown them. I had simply outpaced their need for me. I watched a cousin hug Callista. "You've carried this family," she said with a little laugh. I sipped my water and muttered, "Carried the banners I paid for." None of them heard. Maybe that was the point. My phone buzzed again. I checked it, already guessing the tone. "James, your 3 p.m. meeting with the legal team is confirmed. Title transfer final. All yours." I looked toward the towering tiered cake that sat under a gold-trimmed archway. At the top was a silver family crest, Langley's legacy emblazoned in frosting. Funny, that emblem was trademarked to me now. I needed air, not just to breathe, but to separate. The weight of manufactured love and curated memories had begun to rot inside my chest. So I slipped out of the main garden and into the shaded corridor behind the catering prep station, where the scent of garlic shrimp and melted butter overwhelmed the rose-scented illusion Vera had commissioned. The laughter behind me was unmistakable. Callista's voice, light and ringing, the type that says, "This is my show." Applause followed, then flashes. Another photo op. I didn't look back. They had set up a branded photo station in front of a massive backdrop featuring the Langley crest. Gold, navy, elegant. I knew it intimately. I designed the damn thing. The font was mine. The crest? Refined by my in-house team over 6 weeks of revisions. Yet now, it was being used to prop up a family I was deliberately left out of. Guests lined up to take photos beneath it. A photographer in a headset called out instructions. Only immediate family for the official series, please. Let's tighten the group. I caught Callista's eye. She saw me, clearly, but didn't say a word. Just turned back to adjust her necklace and smile wider. Griffin approached from the side like a man with something too rehearsed on his tongue. Honestly, Em, he started, hands in pockets. You showing up like this? It's just confusing the narrative. I tilted my head, calm. What narrative? He chuckled softly, then leaned closer. That you were never really part of it. No bitterness, no malice, just cold clarity, like he was reading from a memo Callista had drafted for him the night before. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say to people who only needed your silence to feel comfortable. They posed in front of the backdrop, the whole group. Vera sat in the middle, flanked by her children, grandchildren, and the curated few who'd passed her test of proximity over the years. They smiled wide under a logo that only existed because of me. No credit, no thank you, no acknowledgement, just image over truth. I leaned against a tree trunk nearby, arms folded. My mind drifted to something I'd once read on the back of a high school bathroom stall. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I used to think that was dramatic. Now it felt like strategy. Maybe it was time I let this bridge burn, with all of them still standing on it. 2 caterers passed by, whispering. That woman in black's not supposed to be here, right? One said, nodding toward me. Nah, the other replied. She's nobody, just stands around looking angry. I smiled to myself. Nobody, huh? I waited a few more minutes, then straightened my jacket, walked toward the photo area, slow, deliberate. The camera flashed again and again. As I moved into their periphery, conversation stalled. I didn't say a word. I didn't wave. I just walked past the lens line. Callista's posture stiffened. Vera shifted, pretending not to notice. But I saw it, the tightening in their jaws, the momentary glitch in their perfect afternoon. And then, a sound. Low at first. Mechanical, unmistakable. A drone. Heads turned. Guests looked up. A sleek black drone descended into the center lawn, directly in front of the banner. Suspended beneath it, a velvet box and a small screen. The screen flickered to life mid-air, displaying a video with the opening title, For Vera, from Emmeline. Gasps cut through the crowd like glass. I watched them, Callista, Vera, Griffin, the guests, each one shifting uncomfortably as my tribute began to play in the air they thought they owned. Footage of Vera holding me as a baby, me reading to her after her surgery. Photos no one else had. Audio. No one helps me like you do, Emmeline. I don't say it enough, but I mean it. She had said it. I had saved it. Now everyone heard it. I didn't walk back toward them. I didn't explain. I just whispered to myself, let the truth deliver itself. Callista stood at the center of the lawn, crystal flute raised just above shoulder level, the kind of pose she'd practiced in the mirror since high school. Sunlight filtered through the trees behind her, catching the rim of her glass, making the whole moment feel staged for a magazine spread. To the ones who've always stood by Mother, she said, her voice dipping into the kind of tremble meant to sound sincere. To those who've carried the family's legacy with pride. The crowd murmured in agreement, lifted their drinks, and toasted. Laughter followed. A few guests dabbed at their eyes with monogrammed napkins. I didn't move. I was seated near the hedges, away from the formal tables, almost hidden behind a decorative olive tree someone had wheeled in as part of the old world garden theme. From where I sat, I could see everything. Every glass lifted in unearned reverence, every back turned in deliberate disregard. That's when I heard the little girl's voice. "Mom, who's that woman?" she whispered loudly, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "The one by the trash bins?" I didn't need to look. I knew who she meant. The mother glanced in my direction, then quickly turned back to the toast, pretending not to hear. But Vera looked. For the briefest moment, her eyes met mine. And then she looked away, the same way people look at beggars at stoplights. They'd spent a lifetime pretending I wasn't there. Today, they perfected it. Then the sound started. At first, it was low. Not music, not thunder. A mechanical buzz that rippled through the treetops and sent wine glasses quivering. People looked up. "What is that?" A man near the bar shielded his eyes. "Helicopter! That thing's getting close!" Champagne splashed over rims as guests ducked. Someone dropped a flute, glass scattering across the pavers. The staff rushed to gather centerpieces that threatened to topple in the gust. And then, it appeared. A sleek black helicopter hovered above the lawn. Polished, quiet for its size, unmistakably expensive. The rotor wash sent napkins airborne. Guests stumbled back, hair whipped into chaos. The bird descended slowly, controlled, precise, until it touched down on the far end of the estate, just beyond the rows of gold chairs. The side door opened. Two figures stepped out, suits crisp, sunglasses dark. They moved with intention, scanning the crowd as if looking for a specific signal. One of them caught sight of me, nodded once, and spoke clearly into the growing silence. "CEO Emmeline Fairfax," he said, voice firm. "The board is ready. Your presence is required." Everything stopped. Callista's flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the grass. People turned. Faces I hadn't seen since childhood stared like they'd just been told gravity was optional. Vera gripped the edge of her chair. Byron's mouth opened, but produced nothing. I stood. No hurry, no explanation. I simply rose, brushed the hem of my jacket, and walked forward. Past the food stations, past the chafing dishes and butter sculptures, through the crowd that had spent the better part of the day pretending I was decoration. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't need to. I passed the banner bearing the Langley name, designed by my firm, printed with my font, hanging on property I now owned. A guest near the floral arch whispered, "Wait, isn't she the one from that article?" Another replied, "Yeah, tech something, quiet billionaire, bought a city block in Tokyo last year." Vera didn't speak. Neither did Callista. But their silence had finally changed in texture. It wasn't indifference anymore. It was fear. At the edge of the lawn, one of the suited men opened a case and handed me a folder. The cover gleamed with gold trim and the embossed seal of Langley Estate Holdings, LLC. I opened it slowly. Inside were the final documents confirming the restructuring of ownership, the new operating name, and my formal designation as majority stakeholder and chair. I scanned the closing line, where my signature already sat. "Let the meeting begin," I said quietly. Even as the last wind from the helicopter's descent settled, the murmurs remained. I stood near the stone fountain at the estate's edge, drone case in hand, watching the gathering unravel like a ribbon pulled too tightly around a box full of denial. No one was laughing anymore. A cluster of guests whispered near the champagne bar, trying to make sense of what they'd just seen. Callista and Griffin stood apart from the rest, their backs partially turned from one another, whispering, clearly in disagreement. Her hands were clenched, white around the fingers, and he looked like a man rehearsing an apology he'd never say out loud. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The video, the drone, the helicopter, the security team, the folder. They were all conversations I didn't have to start because they finished everything for me. Silence is the most elegant kind of revenge, I thought, and sipped from the same water glass I'd been holding for over an hour. Still room temperature. Still more satisfying than their $300 bottles of rosé. I turned slightly just as Michael, Callista's older brother, the self-proclaimed visionary of the family's business legacy, stepped into my path with a grin too wide to be real. "This party's great, huh?" he said, voice low and patronizing. "My firm helped coordinate all the logistics, permits, vendor contracts, all that stuff." I met his eyes calmly. "You mean the permits signed off by Fairview Properties LLC? He blinked. Yeah. That's one of our partners." "No," I smiled. "That's me, my shell. I approved the permits. You rent from me." He didn't respond. I continued walking, flipping open the folder the agent had handed me earlier. Inside, everything was where it needed to be. Neatly tabbed, the deed to the Langley estate, corporate ownership filings, a detailed flowchart of holding companies that traced every paper trail back to Fairfax Holdings. My holdings. At the end of the document was the contract for today's event, paid in full, billing address listed not to Callista, not to the Langley Foundation, but to my own firm. The whispers around me had changed now. Less confusion, more recognition. People weren't asking who I was anymore. They were remembering. "She's not a guest," someone muttered behind me. "She owns the damn house." Inside the mansion, I walked down the long main hallway, taking my time. The polished floors reflected chandeliers overhead, and the plaques mounted along the walls had been updated for the event. "This wing made possible by the Boone Foundation," one read. I ran my fingernail gently along the corner of the plaque, catching just enough of the edge to peel back the top layer. Underneath it, "Sponsored by Fairfax Holdings." A small laugh escaped me, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it all was. I'd been invisible long enough to know that when they can't erase your power, they hide it. I passed the framed photo of Vera and Dad on their wedding day, then paused at the corridor that led toward the old family office. That hallway held history, most of it real, none of it kind. I thought back to the first moment I knew I needed to own this house. Not visit, not belong to it. Own it. It was months ago. I'd overheard Michael on a speakerphone call while visiting Vera. He was pitching a redevelopment plan to flip the last remaining property of our late father's real estate trust, the one piece not protected under Vera's estate. He called it deadweight. I called my broker the next morning. Within 6 weeks, I quietly bought up every unclaimed share. Didn't announce it, didn't flaunt it, just did it. They thought I was the one needing rescuing, I murmured to myself, staring at the family crest above the fireplace. Turns out I was the only one who knew how to swim. I walked past the sunroom and found Vera standing alone near the window, a half-empty flute of champagne in her hand. Her reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. "You could have told me," she said without turning around. I stopped. "You could have listed me," I replied, then kept walking. My phone buzzed again. I checked it. Board assembled, waiting in the East Conservatory. I turned toward the carved wooden doors, hand grazing the antique handle as I paused. Let them sit. Let them wait. Now they'll attend a meeting in the very house they once pretended I didn't belong to. The East Conservatory was quiet. No music, no chatter, just the soft hum of overhead fans and the tension of people trying not to squirm. I stepped inside. The long glass room still smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the floral arrangements Vera had insisted on every spring. Staff stood to the sides, hands behind their backs, eyes respectfully lowered, but not one moved to stop me. That part of my life was over. At the head of the table, seated uncomfortably upright, were Vera, Callista, Byron, Camille, Griffin, and 2 of the Langley Board's legal advisors. The chair at the far end had been left empty, centered, facing them. Mine. I walked the length of the table in silence and sat. Marjorie Elkins, the family attorney, who had known Vera for decades, stood with a brown leather folder in hand. Her voice was calm and deliberate. "This," she said, "is the original will of Vera Langley, drafted before any amendments were suggested by family counsel." Callista straightened in her seat, visibly stiff. Marjorie continued, opening the folder slowly. It names Emmeline Fairfax as successor trustee, primary heir to all real estate assets, and sole steward of the Langley Legacy and Philanthropic Foundation. No one spoke. Marjorie placed the open document on the table, spinning it slightly toward my end so I could read the text. Every word in Vera's handwriting, witnessed and signed. There had been a time when that would have brought tears to my eyes. Not today. The will was later challenged, Marjorie said. Several red lines and alternate clauses were submitted by family members via proxy counsel, but none were legally ratified. Therefore, the original terms stand. Gasps. Byron exhaled sharply. Camille looked like she might faint. Callista didn't speak. Her jaw had locked into place. Vera's eyes were on the table. Not defiant, just empty. Before anyone could say a word, the door opened, and Elias Vaughn stepped inside. Of course, the ex I'd buried years ago, who now held Callista's arm at every gala like a prized cufflink. He moved quietly, nodding to Marjorie, and stopped beside my chair. I just came to observe, he said, looking only at me. But I thought you should know. What happened back then? You were never the fallback. You were the goal. I didn't answer. Closure doesn't always require a response. He took a seat in the back row without another word. A voice cut the silence. An old family friend. Annette, I think. You've handled this impressively, she said. I mean, for someone like you. There it was. I turned slowly toward her, then smiled just enough. Someone like me usually learns faster. Across the table, Marjorie slid the final set of documents toward me. The room held its breath as I picked up the pen. With steady fingers, I signed my name, on the reinstatement of the original will, on the deed transfer, on the rebranding authorization for the foundation. Fairfax Holdings would replace Langley Foundation within the quarter. When I looked up, the signature stared back like a new chapter in ink. This wasn't revenge. This was structure. And structure holds better than memory. Vera finally found her voice. You wanted to embarrass me, she said, barely above a whisper. I met her gaze evenly. No, I wanted you to know I was never trying to. No one moved. The silence was heavier than screaming. I stood, slipping my copy of the documents into a slim leather case. At that moment, my phone buzzed again. I looked down. CNN Business. Requesting comment for exclusive on Langley estate transition. You're trending worldwide. I turned back to Vera, offering one last look. Equal parts respect and boundary. Let me know if you want to be quoted, I said. I believe in full disclosure. By late afternoon, most of the guests had trickled out. The music had gone quiet, leaving only the soft scrape of silverware being cleared and the occasional low hum of tired staff resetting tables. I found myself back under the old willow tree, one of the few things in this place that had never lied to me. Its branches draped like a curtain, giving me cover from the remains of the spectacle. I sipped a glass of ice water, not for the thirst, but to anchor myself. There was a strange calm in the aftermath. A hush that came not from peace, but from exhaustion. The estate still buzzed in its corners, but the center had caved in hours ago. I heard the footsteps before I saw her. Vera walked slowly, her heels quiet on the grass, the lines on her face deeper than I remembered. Her posture had lost the practiced regality. It was more real now, almost unsure. She stopped just a few feet away. You've always been so capable, she said. I didn't think you needed ceremony. The sentence hung there, not quite a compliment, not quite a confession. I didn't respond, and so she filled the space again. Maybe we mishandled things. I turned my eyes to hers. It's not about mishandling, I said. It's about not trying to handle me at all. Her mouth opened, as if she might say the words I'd never heard. But instead, she offered a sigh. A low half-apology, smothered in decades of denial. No, I'm sorry. Only circumstantial guilt dressed as insight. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside were the finalized documents terminating my sponsorship, support, and affiliation with the Langley Foundation. I handed it to her. "This was always a contract," I said, "not a calling, and I'm no longer invested." She took it without opening it. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, from knowing that whatever script she thought she could still control had run out of pages. As I turned to leave, Griffin and Callista appeared at the side path. "Of course." Griffin cleared his throat. "We should talk, strategically, about synergy." Callista stepped in, smile tight. "Let's not let ego get in the way of family." I looked at her. Really looked. You'd have to recognize it as family first. Neither spoke again. I walked past them. At the staff exit, I passed the same guard who'd questioned my presence earlier that morning. He didn't stop me this time. Instead, he gave me a small salute. Nothing grand, just a nod that said he saw me now. I nodded back. That was enough. Out in the parking lot, the light was beginning to shift, that golden hue just before the sun dipped below the palms. My car was waiting. On the windshield, tucked under the wiper, was a white envelope. No return address. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, a little faded. Me, at maybe 6 or 7, standing between Vera and a birthday cake shaped like a carousel. I remembered that cake. I remembered she'd made it herself. On the back of the photo, in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. "You were always meant for more. I just didn't know how to love more." I folded the photo once, then again, and placed it carefully inside my coat pocket. Some things don't need framing. My phone pinged. "Your jet is cleared for departure. Tokyo delegation confirms Monday." I looked back at the estate one last time. The towering house, the winding path, the ghost of a family that had never really claimed me. Then I looked at the sea beyond it. Not everything that raises you is meant to keep you. The estate was quiet the next morning. No champagne clinks. No flashes from photographers. Just the distant hum of staff packing away tablecloths, the soft snap of folding chairs, and the hush of a place that had been stripped of its audience. I stepped through the garden barefoot, shoes in hand, breathing in the silence like oxygen. It suited me more than the noise ever had. The banners were half lowered, their corners sagging from the dew. Stray programs fluttered in the breeze like abandoned promises, and beneath the arch where Callista had once smiled for the cameras, there were only broken glass stems and a half-melted candle. "Ma'am!" a voice called from my left. A young man, early 20s, dressed in catering black, held a clipboard and looked at me uncertainly. He hadn't been at yesterday's event. "If you're with cleanup," he said, "they need help near the reception tent." I smiled. Calm, clear, not cruel. "I own this estate," I said, slipping on my heels. "I don't clean it. I decide who does." His mouth opened, probably to apologize, but I'd already walked past. Inside the main hall, I checked my phone. The Tokyo merger had closed overnight. Phoenix Holdings now controlled the largest innovation corridor in East Asia. Another message blinked at the top of my inbox. Forbes. Final review submitted. Confirmed. Cirque 4. Women in Tech. Global. I scrolled through a series of unread family group texts. They'd discovered the news, of course. All the right people had tagged them. A few gifs, a few hollow, "we should talk" messages. I deleted the thread, then walked into what used to be Vera's formal dining room. Now it was a conference space, modern, clean, renamed the Fairfax Strategy Room. No portraits, no grand piano, just a glass table, matte black chairs, and a long plaque centered on the far wall. "The table you refused me no longer exists. I built a new one." I met my legal team there. We went over the final name transfer for the estate, from Langley Estate to Fairfax Grounds. It was more than symbolism. It was architecture. And I wasn't doing this for press. I was doing this for structure. Later that afternoon, I stood outside for the official announcement. Cameras recorded. Local press scribbled. The estate gates, once guarded to keep out the wrong sort, now open to applause from students, educators, and a handful of women whose applications I had personally approved for the Fairfax STEM initiative. This would be no longer a venue for galas and donor games. No more champagne towers, no more forced smiles, just laptops, whiteboards, 3D printers. The next girl like me, overlooked, underestimated, and about to build her own empire. Back inside, the press release went live. The clip trended. From opposite corners of the internet, I watched them watching me. Vera, seated on her balcony, wine untouched. Callista, mid-yoga, pausing the video at every headline. Griffin, sipping espresso with the posture of a man trying not to look defeated. "How did she do that?" one voice asked on camera. Another replied, "Quietly." That night, I sat in my home office with a fire going and one last thing left to do. I opened a drawer and pulled out stationery I hadn't used since college. The paper smelled like cedar and thyme. I wrote a letter. "You tried to raise a daughter who'd stay silent. Instead, you raised a woman who refused to." I signed it, folded it, then burned it, because Vera didn't need to read it. I needed to write it. The next morning, my team gathered at the estate for our first official meeting. I stood at the head of the newly finished boardroom table. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everyone quieted when I raised my hand. "I wasn't given a seat," I said. "So I built the floor, the walls, and the damn roof." I paused. "Now let's open the doors to those still waiting outside."